Kia ora mara koutou tātou. Okay, big shout out going out to the watcher listener who is seeing what I'm saying and following up on it. For example, some videos ago I had a long talk about this, and I did 2 or 3 talks on the Manawatu-Whanganui Growth Study. Looked at each particular thing, such as manuka honey and high country farming and the use of ohakea, the airport, agricultural development, and so on and so on. But at that point, I was quite concerned that there wasn't really a lot of publicity. There really wasn't much media on it at all, as far as I could see. So it's great to see, and thank you for sending it to me, this material from stuff.co, and the fact that people are actually reading this report and writing it up. One of the things I've got to say is that it takes you a fair while to read the thing and to actually digest it and to come up with something. Okay, so to respond, I've got to say the following, that I don't think the article says enough about underutilised Māori land, which is quite a big part of this. And in fact, there's a whole section at the end on underutilised Māori land in the Manawatu-Whanganui areas. Now then, the issues that pertain are still here. For example, we're talking about an overall regional situation of depression. I think that's not too strong a word. People don't call it depression, but they're calling it, there's words such as subdued, not performing well, underperforming is used a lot actually, relative to other regions. And so I think it's really just a shadow away from depression here. So what are we doing wanting to use more Māori land? I think there's an interesting problem or conundrum or whatever here. Number one, there's the often quoted situation when someone talks about underutilised Māori land, they want to take it, and I hear that and put that on the table. Number two, does it show that we're using our existing resources well? And the answer to that is no, obviously. If everything else was running along tickety-boo, we wouldn't have a need to go and find uses for underutilised Māori land. Three, what do we want to do with that land? And one of the things that I think is most promising in the report, I'm not sure, I'm going to talk about how promising it is or not in a second, is manuka honey. And the idea is that a lot of this underutilised Māori land could be used for manuka honey. And in earlier videos I've said such things as you would need afforestation. You would need afforestation of the areas in the appropriate manuka. Which brings me to a really good article, actually, Manuka Honey Brands a Buzz at Scanner. And that's from the Don Post of October the 16th, anybody who's interested in that. And it just really raises the issue of do you really know you've got the real McCoy Manuka honey? And I've gone over that, saying that we've got to make sure that our Manuka honey breeding programs are right. I've done a little bit of research since then, and in fact I've gone out to a few nurseries and actually bought some little Manuka plants just to see how they grow and so on. And one of the things that I discovered when I tried to get from nurseries a reading on whether this was of a certain chemical situation that would yield high quality Manuka honey, whether the stock was of that kind, was some idea that if you freeze it for long enough, then it all comes right. And that kind of struck me as pretty strange. But here we are, Manuka Honey Brands a Buzz at Scanner. We all know what the problems are, says John Rawcliffe, UMF Honey Association. This is about building the confidence of the consumer that what they're buying is genuine Manuka honey. And I think that's where we need to start right here. I think that the worst possible scenario is that if people cover hills and scrub, to use the old term, and I'm familiar with the old term because I used to cut scrub for a living, if people just cover hills with scrub and hope that the honey's going to be okay, that's ridiculous. That we have to have the proper trees going out onto these areas, and these areas need not necessarily be underutilised Māori land. That, I think, is to some extent a red herring. If Manuka honey has a better yield than sheep farming, we'll let the Manuka honey stands, let the Manuka stands, the forest, go on to sheep farms. That's that. if we're farming for profit, then that is that, it seems to me. What we want to do is to make sure after that that every single step in the quality chain is right. And I just feature that because I think that we have a situation here in the report which talks again and again about attitude, actually. If you read it, it's really saying that the attitude is not good in the region. And I'm trying to put my finger on that a little more and not come up with much. What I'm trying to say right now is that if we talk about the attitude to Manawatu-Whanganui, it has to be a high quality attitude, and we have to go into it in the right way, with the right nurseries, with the right products. And I should be able to go out here in Palmerston North and go to the nurseries and say, hey, what about this, without somebody trying to obfuscate. And I'm not talking about low level people here, or not necessarily obfuscate, but someone to be able to say, well, okay, this tree, Peter, has the right characteristics for Manawatu-Whanganui. Never mind freezing, never mind this, never mind that. This is the tree to go out with to begin with. Here's the type of climate that we want, the actual temperature that we want, and then you can work that off your land. Here's the type of soil that we want, and so forth and so on. We should be working on this to get a kind of package of quality assessment now, before we start turning huge tracts of lands into Manawatu-Whanganui. The other thing that joins this, and I note that the report talks about the Māori population and Māori land as well. Go to, again, from Friday, October the 16th, the Dominion Post, October the 16th to 15. Māori lung cancer rates much higher, and there's just this catalogue, and a good article by Ben Heather, this catalogue of diabetes, cancer and so forth, and all of the rates, quoting, and I mention these names because I think anybody interested in this should go to the sources. Professor Diana Safati from Otago University's Cancer Control and Screening Research Group, also mentioning Professor Tony Blakely of Otago University. So they're the sources for anybody interested in this topic. But obviously if you have these huge disparities of, for example, 8 years in longevity between the Māori population and others in this country. I don't think we can talk about the Pākehā population because now that I think that has shifted with an Asian quotient or whatever. If you talk about the smoking rates and so forth of Māori women, which this article does, and you talk about a region which is not strong economically with a substantial Māori population, then those figures are going to be worse. And I just put that out there too, because I don't think there's been enough made of that. And I don't criticise the Manawatu-Whanganui Growth Study people, that wasn't their job. And they do take a lot of time on Māori issues and on, as in the Māori population and in the underutilisation of Māori land. But I think that there are other things involved here. In other words, I think that where you have regions that are not performing in New Zealand, a lot of these stats for people at risk in those areas get worse. You're with Peter Cleave here.